start in the
use. Is this all the ones we have? Thank God I made it 2 hours.
Yes.
So, since you feel strongly about the order, which order do you want to do?
Let's go from the bottom. Hey,
Right, and here goes 2 hours. Which one? The HTTP method?
Oh, come on.
Which one? HTTP method or the sockets one?
Fetch and then the sockets.
Oh, this one. Okay.
Start with those.
And which sockets? There's 2.
Yeah.
There's this one. There's this one.
That as well.
All right. Oh, patch is an actual verb?
Yes. It's
I've never heard of that. What does it do?
Like stuff. I don't know.
That is helpful, Carol. You should maybe work in docs.
It's kind of like put, but generally it's used when you're merging information in rather than replacing it wholesale.
So, but what are you sending to that server? Like you're sending a payload that has like.
Yeah, it has a request entity body, but instead of having, say that like I want to update your dependents in an HR system, instead of sending your entire employee record as part of the request, I would just send only the dependents field, or something along those lines.
So basically, it's the same as.
Oversimplifying a lot.
So it's basically the same as put, except that because you use a different verb, you're kind of indicating the absence of information means don't touch it.
Means don't delete it, just maintain what's there.
I see.
Again, like hand waving. But,
I mean, that makes sense. Are these the only places where we have verbs?
Yep.
And just to clarify, nothing's blocked today, right? Because I'm pretty sure you
There's
can
a workaround actually right away. The example, HTTP method patch.
Yeah, perfect. Okay.
Yeah, you can do that.
It's just that, enough people say that it's common enough, so why not to add it?
So the only thing is, we have now 2 overloads. We have. Oh, that's why we have 4 here, and we have 2 here because we make constellation token option.
I put them together. I think that's enough, but feel free to push back. Or we put them together.
Yeah, so the situation that we currently have, let me just drag this guy over here, so for context, is we have that, right? So
Are
we
you
have.
sharing the screen, by the way?
I am. Nobody's on the call right now, so I don't even know why I'm in the call. So I don't. In fact, I will.
What is on the live streaming? There's 18 people watching. Okay, yeah, you're showing something.
Yeah, I'm showing it on this. On live stream, I'm not showing it on thing, but. So basically, we have this today. So we have those guys here. Like I don't feel like we need to follow that. I'm fine with just having optional arguments for that one because it's effectively the same thing. Like I don't see a reason why we need to do that.
That's at least like the pattern that we follow up in new APIs. So here it's like questionable: should we follow the pattern of on the class, or should we follow the whatever we decide?
Okay. It would be a bit nicer if it followed the exact same pattern. Do we care about saving one of the?
Yeah, I agree with Christoph on this. I think it would just look strange.
So personally, like I would say, when in doubt, always follow what the type already has, over doing something new. But in general, like I can't think of a single downside to doing the proposal on the left-hand side, because when people don't really see the APIs like this, right? They see it in IntelliSense collapsed by name. So you have to actually drill into them. The only place where you would see this is docs. And honestly, like, especially for docs, this is actually somewhat annoying if you see them twice.
But the damage has been already done, so I agree.
Yeah.
You see them twice, and then I think, like, somebody sooner or later will see them, somebody will use reflection, and we will be surprised that there are no 2 overloads, and I think the value of saving, one method slot
All right.
is kind of low.
Sold.
Then I think we are going with the other one.
Are these not virtual?
No, because they go through HTTP client,
and
message enter or something.
Okay.
Which is effectively the question I have is like, I guess the abstraction there is just it takes a message which has the verb encoded already in it.
We go actually through, what would we call? Under the hood, oh, shoot.
I mean, it's kind of nice adding a new verb. It's literally just that, but I'm actually surprised that it's.
The implementation will create actually like static string, so that it's not recreated over and over again. That's the whole difference. Under the hood, the HTTP client handler doesn't care. Just get the string.
That's what I thought. All right, so then I guess the only feedback here would be. You want to update the proposal to be this?
Yep, I'm just editing it. So.
And let me just do
The
this.
AP, if the fields are exactly the same.
Yep, that's basically more or less what David Schubert also said.
Yep, update it.
Looks good. And proposed. By the way, is that's all. All right, then let's do that. Okay.
So this one, is this one about the long? Yeah. We're trying to add long overloads. So basically, there's an API that takes a file path. I don't think it's correctly camel case or Pascal case. It takes offset into the file, and over sockets you just send that piece of file. There seems to be sometimes there can be large files, so you need long offset, more than 4 gigs, right? And the only question is how to expose the long offset, because we already are exposing the offset as int. Should we expose something like offset long? Should we call it differently?
I think we do have APIs that have things like long length exposed.
So why is the count int and not long?
You don't send usually more than 4 gigabytes on the network over, in one.
Wants to risk doing this update again? Like if the file is already so long that doesn't fit into an int, I can imagine the count, or offset. I mean,
Yeah, I think I asked that. Remember, or I.
It doesn't matter, right? You can still pass it into good.
yeah, we should just
But
make long and be future-proof.
But the problem is, I agree with Christoph again. Like if you have variables, if the caller has variables which are start and end, and both of those variables are long, they're going to evaluate to a long once you subtract them, which means you're now forcing the caller to do a cast.
No, that's what I'm saying. I think it should be a long.
Yeah.
Because you can still passing in
Yeah,
and
yeah,
so
yeah.
for the caller nothing matters. Like nothing.
And if we have limitations, we can actually do the check, in the API and.
Especially when you pass in 4 gigabytes. So like the.
Oh, well, it's an offset in the file, so.
So I think it seems somewhat weird to have
It's an offset in the file, and then it transmits 4 gigs of data. Nobody.
Yeah.
Oh, 4 gigs. Like it can transmit only 10 bytes, right?
Sure.
Or something.
I mean, if you have fiber, like it's probably like a matter of 5 seconds. But for poor people like me that have 5 Mbit upload, it would take like a week to complete.
What would the offset property do if it's more than 2 gigs in? Throw?
Good question. On the other hand, who would use that if they use the long?
We should do the same thing that array length. What does array length do when long length is long? Well, it's a bit weird because we cannot create arrays that are long, that have long length. We added the property, but we didn't add the ability to create long arrays.
Well, also we don't have an index that actually takes it long. So like either way, you're stuck to the.
I know, but we have a long length property, which is basically the same issue. We have a length property and long length. And I wonder what was the plan to, what should we return from length when long length is...
I honestly think arrays we just fucked up. Because we only did it half-assed. We only did it long.
So MSDN says that array.length throws an overflow exception if it's out of bounds.
Oh.
or if it's too long.
So to use it, you first have to check the long length.
Yeah, so per MSDN, the array.length counts the number of elements across all dimensions of the array, and each dimension can have up to 2 gigabytes of 2 billion elements. So you can imagine it would be possible to create an array with, 3 times 2 billion dimensions, or 3 times 2 billion elements.
Yeah,
Probably
I don't think the runtime supports that.
Right.
So interestingly,
It's documented though.
If we add the count long, we also need public long, count long, get.
Do we expose the count on?
Well, I assume that the APIs are basically, there are constructors and then there are properties that tell you what you...
Are you assuming it's symmetric?
Yeah.
Would be right.
Just count is specified.
Yes.
Mm.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
So I wonder if we shouldn't just say whatever, leave the count as int. Maybe provide the convenience APIs to pass long.
So what's the problem with count? Why would we not just leave it long?
Well, we cannot change it. We would have to expose like count long again or something.
But it's the same as offset, right? So it would be whatever that would be.
It's just these APIs, so, it's just like the array, and we joked about how screwed up the APIs are.
Yep.
How do you use an API where like offset and count can throw? Are these APIs now obsolete? Like basically, how can you safely use the offset property after this change?
You would have to check before calling the property whether the property.
You basically first check the long offset.
Yeah.
Well, then why would you then access the offset?
So one other alternative is to have a sumPackets element long class.
Yes, so we could have a separate class and then have an abstraction interface, but then, like this type is used in some other APIs, correct? They would all have to be updated.
So I think if we make this basically a mode, we should expose a boolean, in my opinion. It says like is larger than 4 gigs or something.
No, once we expose the long properties, why would you ever access the other ones?
Everything becomes weird because now that means basically what you want is this, right? You basically say I call an existing API that only deals with ints, right? So that means I can only accept up to 4 gigabytes. So I can just refuse this thing outright and say like this is too large, I cannot handle that.
But what are the existing APIs? There are no existing APIs that take...
Whatever code uses that API as an input right now.
I'm pretty sure that you create instance of this type and you pass this type in, not the other way.
I'm saying that customers could potentially do the same thing, right? Similar to how we have substring, right? You don't pass an array segment in, but you basically have APIs that take an int start and an int length, and effectively they just accept those guys, right? So...
Yeah, I think it's weird.
Who's using that type? Like, is it?
I think it's weird to have a property say.
I just checked nobody.
That will tell you whether some value is larger than int max. There's a property, you can check it yourself. You say offset long greater than int max, throw.
Or just try catch. If you're lazy. The boolean is probably superfluous.
So it's send packet async.
It doesn't show up on your APIs.NET, by the way.
Exactly, it's never created, like you create one of those, and then you just pass it, and the API that you pass it to will never access the offset property.
Right.
Like offset property is now obsolete, literally.
Didn't we do similar things for other I/O stuff, like stream? Don't we have the same problem there?
I don't know. For stream it may be different because I think we added some overloads, correct, that deal with longs. Not like a type that you pass in.
I think on stream we may be lucky because maybe position already was a long. Yeah, position already was a long. So we're just real lucky. And then length, I guess, is also wrong. Yeah, it turns out stream we didn't fuck up from the get-go.
Well, so the other option, we started to talk about, we would add a new class and an abstraction and take an abstraction, but I don't think it's worth it.
Well,
it's just too many new types, and it's just, I think we have to just accept it. We're going to have two long properties, and the old properties are literally obsolete. We can apply the obsolete attribute to them or not. We probably should, because it would be surprising to consumers.
So length, by the way, when it eventually goes into a Win32 pinvoke, is a keyword instead of a keyword. So we're never going to have long lengths, just as a point of interest.
On Windows.
On Windows, yeah.
Well, still there are new Windows APIs. And I can imagine what the, basically if your count is longer than int max value, it would chunk it and call the underlying API several times.
Yep.
Actually, that's what you have to do anyway, so otherwise you are forced.
That's what you have to do today.
Buffers that are larger than 4 gigs as well, which many people don't want for obvious reasons. So I guess that makes sense in general. Like you would always chunk it if you exceed a certain threshold.
The only argument for the count or length being long is the hey, I do subtraction of 2 offsets and I want to have it easy. But
No, I do think that you have a very large file. You can send it to using one of those calls, as opposed to you have to chunk it manually. You just create the structure and you pass it to send async and you're done. The underlying API just calls send 3 times.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm thinking whether another alternative should have an API that accepts the stream somewhere.
Accepts what?
The stream.
And
for this, that's the next proposal actually, to add if you go down over here, file stream.
Well, I would say if we go down that path, I wouldn't do the other one. I would just say if you want more than 4 gigabytes, great. You do one that takes the stream.
You still need the offset in there. So we could add the long offset over here.
No, I would only do this one here. I would only do this one and say if you want to... I wouldn't even do file stream. I would just say stream, I guess. Like, what do we care that it's a file?
The reason was that the file stream is the underlying implementation, which is not exposed. That's a question if we can turn it into stream.
The API is optimized for passing in a proper file handle.
Yeah.
As opposed to reading from memory.
Implementation-wise.
I see. So when we call when I pass in the file stream, we never go through the file stream. You just take the handle and then pass to the underlying 132 API.
Yep.
And packets element becomes a weird API.
We can reject this one.
So I mean, like, what would
let's go back to the. Let's not.
Before we go there, before we do this, like, what would that return, for example? Would that also throw when you construct it from this, or is the expectation if I do this one, then this one would just construct a file stream on the fly?
It does already construct the file stream on before.
So
or actually, it's not file stream. You're right. For the file path, it has this file stream. Yes. For the byte array, it doesn't.
Right.
So it would throw for the byte array.
The internal consumer of this will construct one on your behalf.
I'm not sure if I like this.
Yeah, if you combine this with the previous one, you basically end up with a type that has like 3 modes.
Yeah, exactly.
Which path you went through, you get like vastly different behavior. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, it doesn't seem like a great design of a type.
Also, it's meant to be like a data holder, It basically is a range of, bytes in a file. And now it starts having behaviors, like it creates a file stream for you.
The other thing about file stream is this type now takes ownership of the stream, so you can never dispose of it.
Yeah.
It's basically the expert that, whoever calls it, knows better.
Yeah.
And there were reasons for why people actually wanted that.
So, okay, let's start with this one here. So this scenario here is very clear. They just want to submit files they want to be able to at least index into a file that is larger than 4 gigs, which seems like a fairly sensible thing to do.
Well, except, the two APIs are tied. So if we keep the file handle APIs, long count doesn't make sense. If we don't, it does.
No, you can still chunk, right?
You cannot chunk because you basically just do one Windows API call. You just pass the handle and you tell it send.
Yeah, but then you just increment the offset for the chunk and then you call the API again for the same thing.
You can call them in a loop with the same handle.
Yeah.
You said that the handle ownership. What happens with the ownership when you call the Win32 APIs?
I believe that the Win32 API will require the caller to close the handle when the caller's done. In our case, the caller would be the internal socket implementation.
Oh, okay. So I thought I misunderstood. So I was thinking that he said that once you pass the handle to Win32, they will close it after they are done.
Oh, so no, I understood it as this.
Yeah, generally speaking, most Win32 APIs will duplicate the handle if there's a question.
Okay, then we can do. And I do think that we should do the long one to never ever have this.
Okay, so we have this API here. We basically just have these guys, right? And then the other one was the file stream one. I don't quite understand what the scenario of the file stream one is.
Basically setting up, caching and or other system things that you need access to the handle. That's the point.
So what caching? What is it? Sorry.
Over there, the second paragraph.
Sharing
access.
See, what I don't understand with that statement though is as soon as you call the API, you transition ownership of that thing over to the socket APIs, right? So it's you can only cache one time, right? And then the thing is dead afterwards.
No, I understand what they are saying. So there are so many, when you open a file stream or file handle, there are so many options. So we would have to either put all these options into this type, or basically types that consume this type.
Oh, you're talking about this part here.
We would have, there are so many different options, and they would have to show up on the API. Or you just let people open file stream however they want, passing whatever options they want, and then we just store it.
So this one I buy. I was thinking of this one here, which I didn't quite understand, because if you transition ownership over to the socket API, your caching is not that useful, right?
That's not
It's about all the options.
all the other.
The option ones make sense. Yes.
Okay, that makes sense. That actually send. So on socket, I think it completely makes on socket. Now, why do we need constructors on send packet element?
So the way this API works is that you basically, so they don't show the other API. So there's this other API called send. What is this?
Let's see, I think they don't want to repeat. They don't want to have an API on begin send file, for example, that takes the handle and the element. The element is kind of like a holistic package of a handle and offset and count.
Yeah, so the thing I don't quite understand is that we already have an API that basically takes that. So the way this works today is if you say socket send, this is the guy. So basically what you pass in here is the socket async event args, and that thing basically holds the fucking element, right?
Yeah.
So this would basically your one-off thing. Now, mean, this is a class, the other one is a class, you have two allocations for that. Like, I don't know whether that actually matters when you transmit a large file, but for smaller things it may matter. But that, like, what I don't understand is, like, why would we add this API rather than, take the element directly, or some other data holder?
Simplify. If you want to transmit the whole file, you just call this API.
Yeah.
But
Alternatively, instead of us adding a shit ton of APIs to this element thing, we could add a struct-based descriptor that we can design to be, long from the get-go, so we don't have this mode problem. And then you just change those methods to accept that guy instead, and then you don't even allocate anything. You're just passing a struct. And then you just have the same information, but then you can, have file stream based, you can have it string based, and then you just don't have that problem. Seems cleaner to me than trying to coerce so many things on this one type here.
So we overload on what? On send file? And begin send file on socket?
Well, this one and then this one in general, like send async seems a bit.
So what are the event arcs over there?
The NX I think is a.
Socket async.
It's like holy shit! This is just on that. Yeah. Oh, it even has elements. It has an array of those guys. Well, that's amazing. So you can. Yeah, maybe not then. Yeah, if it is a new type, then we would have to also find a way we can pass in this guy here, and then
it's getting ugly.
And then you cannot just add a new property here, because then you have a problem in which order they are getting sent. I'm pretty sure that the contract for these methods says we take this array and send them in order.
Well, what you could do is you could introduce a new property, let's say send packets elements long or something, right?
Yes.
And you can say you can either set this one or this one. Just set both of them with throw and say like that's an invalid request. And then we just say, if you only specify this one but not the long one, well the long one can be from this one because it's a implicit conversion.
Yeah.
And otherwise you pull in the other one.
I would say the cure is worse than the disease in this case.
Yeah. On the other hand, though, like, I don't know, having modes on this type, I'm not sure is better. If you just have fewer types, I don't think you have better semantics.
You have modes in some other place.
Yeah, but the modes in the other place are, I would argue, easy to understand. Because basically this other thing is just a request holder, right? You pass in the data and you call a method. It's like, like process startup info, right? Set call. Like, I mean, you don't pass this guy around, you don't do anything with that. Right. I don't know. Seems like a ton of APIs to me.
So actually, this send packet element, the fact that it's going to have modes, I think we cannot avoid it, and to some extent it's okay. I'm more concerned about slapping more APIs on socket. Like, it's already kind of busy, and I think it would be nice if we didn't add so many new APIs for advanced scenarios. Or controlling buffer sizes and sending very long files at very long offsets. I wonder if it's possible to hide as much of it as possible into the struct, into the small class.
Yeah, I mean that when we looked at it, I think I actually don't remember looking at the socket APIs overload. So in the networking, API review, so I wouldn't be, I wouldn't cry if we ditch the socket part. Yep, you wouldn't.
So it depends on like why these APIs are there, right? If I could see them. I don't know what they're called through. Right? If they're basically just conveniences to call to the other API, I would agree with you. Especially because these APIs are not super convenient to call either, considering the number of arguments they take.
So the begin send file is the old async, right? So yeah.
No, I mean like even if you just look at send file, right? It seems like file, pre-buffer, post-buffer, transmit file, optional override, pretty much stuff. But like if this is actually just calling another API directly, that basically just amounts to giving the file handle, it may be more efficient to call, right? Because the other one at least requires you to construct a send packets element, which is not a small type anymore. It forces you to construct the event args thingy, which is also a ginormous type. So,
but I think we could start with just adding the socket packet element APIs, and if people complain about performance, which I would be kind of surprised. I mean, you're dealing with networking and sending large files. I think creating one more object on the heap is not such a big deal. And we start with the simpler API, and if people complain, we add more.
Even though it's sockets, right? So like it doesn't have to go over the physical network, right? It might just be loop back through the same system, which is basically glorified IPC, right? Which is relatively efficient.
If that's what it is, you shouldn't be using sending files. You should send a file name, and the other side can just access the file.
Yeah, if you own the protocol, maybe, but I guess. Yeah, I'm not sure. Like, I mean, like honestly, the overall complexity of this type, I don't think is taking a hit one way or the other. So we just take this guy here and just look at what the result will look like. So we have this one here. So let me just reorder this a little bit.
Oh, I see. But change the offsets and.
So those are the ones we already have. So we're not planning on doing anything with those. So those are the ones you would add. Now we would also add these guys here, right? So we would have so we have that. So that would mean we would have that one, and we would also have
So in addition, we need to change. Should we change the offsets to long in the file stream? Okay.
So I was about to say, like, do we even need the int-based ones here?
Well, are we keeping the file stream constructors? Because there's still the ownership question. Because once you pass a file stream into this API, you can't touch it ever again.
But you're responsible, actually. You're not responsible for this problem.
That's true, but that's the only way you can pass in the options, right? Otherwise, you need basically an API that takes the file path plus everything the file stream constructor takes. Like, what sharing do you have? What caching do you want to use, right? Like, this is effectively you control essentially how Windows will access the file and construction of the handle, right? Like, I don't think people today, given what the guy wrote, care about caching the file stream instance. It's all about controlling
how it's created.
Then why not pass in the handle?
Because the problem is, I guess we could do that, but like that seems weird. Why would you do that?
Because you care about the handle more than anything else, right? I mean, we have a file handle type.
What does it solve? What problem does it solve if we take handle instead of file stream?
As a gut check, it seems like it would make it less likely that people would try to cache these and reuse them. I don't know.
I mean, we have this problem today, by the way, like stream reader, stream writer, right? As soon as you pass a file stream to them, they start owning that guy.
Okay.
So it's
if it's an established pattern, then go for it.
I mean, it's not a great pattern, to be clear, like especially for file readers and others where you're sometimes surprised when the underlying stream got disposed when you disclose the reader. But I think in this case, I don't think people are surprised per se. They're just, like, all you would do at the call side is you would just change, instead of passing in, stream, you would pass in stream.handle, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, but everything else probably looks the same. So I don't.
Okay.
The question is just whether we need these guys here, right? Because I mean, for consistency, we would need that.
Oh, I think we should remove the ones that take int. You're now in advanced scenario land.
Yeah, I agree with that. So like, I would just cut this guy down. I would only have the long ones.
So do we need the ones that take string files? A string file path. I guess.
Well, those are the
There's
ones.
well,
Oh, you're saying if you want to have long ones, you have to use a file stream?
Yeah. Maybe it's it's fine to leave them. They are safer.
To me, the problem is these guys, right? Those guys are not the problem, right? I mean, and given that we have to have those guys anyway, like.
Should we add an overload that takes just the string file path?
That exists already.
Yeah.
It exists where?
On the send packets element control.
On this? Okay.
Basically, 0 and 0 as magic values means send the whole thing.
I see. What does end of packet means?
What do you mean end of packet? Oh, here?
Yeah.
isn't that like saying like it's the last entry in the arcs or something like that?
It basically means like afterwards and.
Question.
What are the semantics?
Not offhand.
Maybe close the underlying thingy or something.
Looking for it.
Okay, I guess maybe it's.
I think it's probably about not. This flag is used to granular control of the content of each message on a datagram or a message-oriented socket. So like send the message, basically don't wait for more data or something like that. I don't know why we don't. Maybe it's like from the old async style time frame when we didn't have just the array in the Rx, but it's weird.
I was just wondering whether it does something with the handle, like differently.
There we go. Transmit.
Like tries to close it or.
Specifies that this element should not be combined with the next element in a single send request from the socket layer to the transport. Yeah, okay.
So
I think that's exactly what you just said now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something gets closed.
So are we obsoleting offset and count?
Are we allowed to obsolete things? Oh, for asking that.
But maybe a frozen video again.
Yeah, so it seems to me we probably should. I mean, this is one example where I think obsolescence is reasonable because you're literally just saying, don't call this one, call this other one over here. It's all the same type.
Exception, and you don't even know about it.
Right. So would the old one always throw no? No. Would only throw for.
Yeah, it would only throw when it overflows, but it is a big surprise if you don't.
It's still a. That's not a breaking change because something in your process has to change. Right? You need to upgrade at least one component that uses the new APIs. So it's strictly speaking not a breaking change on the API
You're getting this type from somebody, and
Well, it's a breaking change from the API contract standpoint, but it's not a breaking change from an application standpoint because you had to upgrade at least something in your process
Correct.
called the new API. So you have changed something. So at that point, all bets are off.
Unless you consume the library, of course.
Sorry?
Unless you consumed library, that upgrades.
You have to update to a new version of the library. That seems.
Yeah.
You have to have something. I mean, it's never an in-place update bug, right? Because you have to.
You might not care about networking at all. Like, oh my gosh, like
Right.
what's happening? So.
In which case, I would say it's a different.
But then you don't get the obsoleted errors, right? The library.
Well,
Only for your code. Only if you use it.
exactly. So like if you have like this case where you have A and B and like A calls B, but you are just using A and B indirectly, then you never know. But like that's just.
But if you're not accessing these properties, you just pass type through, you don't have a problem.
Yeah.
The problem is if you're actually accessing these properties, but you got the type, the instance from some other library, then you may be surprised that suddenly it starts throwing.
And basically Carol's point is more along the lines of like, if you as an app developer, you may never call any of these APIs, right? Like you may have tried one, not the other, or maybe the other one hasn't even a new version yet. So now one guy is basically processing larger files, but like it seems like you would have to work really hard to come up with a scenario where you, first of all, you hit this case, and secondly, like, I think it's very weird to have libraries that do that sort of thing. Like, it's not a library scenario, I would argue.
So the only thing kind of against obsoleting, so I imagine, let's say I'm writing socket.send, or my own wrapper for sockets. I get one of these types, I read the buffer property. It's not null, so somebody just passed me an array to send. I would rather access the offset and count properties because then I don't have to cast.
And that will still work.
That will still work, and it will always work.
Yes.
It's only basically when I'm in the file stream mode, then I shouldn't be accessing the count and offset properties. Yeah, and that is where the modal property of this type kind of kicks in.
I don't think we should obsolete. We should obsolation via the API compat tool is fine. We get bitten by obsolation. Like we port it to .NET Framework. Either we remove the obsolation or we keep it there. Then it breaks someone. People are pissed. Not worth it.
I mean, the negative is that some people will not know, and they will get
soft. I would say soft obsolation.
What's soft obsolation?
We have tools to do that, which currently are not enforced on you, and it's ignorable easily.
And obsolescence is not?
Nope. It's a warning, and many people have treats warning as errors. That's
So they chose not to.
Carrots. Yes.
They chose not to ignore it. I see. Yeah. I don't know. I'm torn a bit.
Is the obsolescence the only discussion we have now?
Well, basically the behavior specified. These properties will throw if constructed from a file with no offsets. And I suppose what they will throw is not supported. We are probably somewhat overthinking that anyway, in the sense that I don't think user code will ever use offset long. Or,
I mean, maybe not never, but only people who they create complicated wrappers for sockets or some other. I suppose that's true.
It's the minority of the experts scenario already. So.
I mean, the only case I could think of where people actually access this is for asserts or something. Or unit testing, but I mean, in application code, you construct the package you handle.
Yeah, I agree. Okay.
I don't think it's not really that bad.
Yeah, let's leave them unobsoleted because it will be very. You will have to do range checks and.
On the other hand, if what I said is true, obsolescence is also not bad. It probably doesn't matter. So how about this? I will respond to this one here. Then I will go here say. Given. Let's see. Somebody should this.
Those were the simple ones.
You should also update the documentation to kind of explain what the end of packet flag is for. If we're touching this anyway.
Alright.
Yeah. Like, MSDN actually gives a good use case for it, but it's buried.
Was it?
Because the underlying stack could combine payloads together into a single larger packet, but sometimes your protocol has a hard limit at something like 40K, and that flag tells the networking stack, don't consolidate. Like, actually treat this as an independent packet.
If you found it somewhere, can you send me a link, or ideally file a documentation bug, but whatever. You know,
Well-
I'll settle for the link.
But it can combine it with previous instances.
Well, the end of packet basically says like don't combine, right?
No, but don't combine the subsequent, correct?
Yeah.
The previous ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can combine the previous one with this one, or no?
Yeah.
This one is last one, yes.
So the
Basically,
document
it's like don't combine anything after this one.
Yeah, but that doesn't solve the problem that you were saying.
It does in the sense, so the documentation didn't explicitly say the word nagling, but I assume it means disable nagling. So,
Yeah, it's just you have to manually. What I'm saying is you have to manually count how many
yes,
without end of packet.
it's a
you
manual
sent
process.
before, correct?
You're absolutely right. Sure.
Where you found it?
Of course, good luck finding this again.
So what should file stream property do? Should it construct?
Well, we have buffer and file path already, so it should be the same thing. Like, you know, if you don't pass buffer, if you pass file path, it's gonna return null. Actually, I just checked. So I think that we should be consistent. Now the question is if we should expose the file stream in case you passed us only the file path.
So I would say
I would basically say no. Like just like only if you it gives you whatever you created the object with.
So is file path a property on this type already?
Yes. And buffer as well.
Yeah, then
So this is yet another, like you have it has already the multi, modes thing.
it's basically a union.
Yes.
Of byte array,
Yes, it is.
string, and a stream. So, okay, one more thing that I just thought about. Does it work just for file streams, or it works for any handle that you can read? The underlying Win32 API. Because I wonder whether the stream parameter should not be stream, not file stream.
well, the problem is
What
stream
other-
doesn't have a handle, right? So what would you?
What?
Stream doesn't have a handle property.
Stream, yeah.
That's what we need.
I see. Well, that would go back to Levi's comment. Maybe it should take a handle.
But what other kind of handle would it take aside from a file handle? And at that point, use file string, per your suggestion.
Can't you create a
Socket handle?
already? It's a bit backward, but I think you can already construct a file stream with a handle.
Yeah, you can. It's basically just calling duplicate handle into the covers.
Can we look at the Win32 API actually?
Yeah,
So you-
transmit packets is the Win32 API.
I mean, in Windows, pretty much everything is a file handler anyway, right? So like you can always, like if it's a network handler or something weird, you can probably construct a file stream over the network.
Can you go actually to the transmit file?
32 transmit file.
Transmit packets is the API in question here.
Package or packet?
Packets.
Packets.
It will basically say what are the valid handles.
So
it takes over that structure?
So this, that's the structure that we're passing in an array of those guys.
Okay, and we need to.
If you scroll down, there will be a hyperlink where you can go into it.
This guy?
Handle, okay, handle to an open. Yeah, I wonder if they literally mean file, or somebody who wrote the doc.
I mean, in Windows, it's more or less the same thing, right? Like everything almost is a file handle, right? Underlying wise.
Well, handles are more than file handles. There are many different handles.
Everything that has a buffer essentially is conceptually a file handle in Windows.
Well, the point is that our file stream does not work with an arbitrary handle. If this API takes an arbitrary handle that you can read from, then our API will not work for those handles.
Well, I mean, like you probably call read file and write file when you pass in a handle to. Like if you have a file stream and we call read and write, on the covers we just call read file and write file, right? And so whatever Windows accepts handle-wise on those APIs, file stream will support.
I am not sure. I think we have. I remember being in some discussions about our file stream not being so
Flexible.
Possible.
We have can read, can see, can what, but is it related to this, Roy? What will change? Are we still discussing the stream, but passing handle versus file stream?
So the only question I would have is, let's say we take handle instead of file stream. How does it work cross-plat? We have the same concept there. You can always pass in a PDR. That's fine. What does handle do on file stream when we in analytics?
Does this API even work cross-file?
File stream?
I think socket does.
No, not file stream.
Sockets. I think it does.
This particular.
I think sockets.
Yes, I've seen Unix implementation.
Yeah. It's such a awesome scenario to do in the kernel as opposed to in user mode. Because basically what it does, it just tells the kernel to send these files, so it doesn't have to go like read data into user mode and then go back to kernel mode to send it.
It moves data straight from the hard drive into the NIC.
Yeah.
Like completely by.
Well, let's leave it as file stream. I think like the scenario of sending something from non-file handle is either doesn't work or is very far-fetched.
No pun intended. So anything else?
Would there know that similar to buffer? Wrong.
So what? Where?
So the file stream is basically the motivation is that it's similar to buffer behavior of buffer and file path. Forget it. I'm gonna add it later.
I'm not sure I'm following. Okay. What? Three down. 4 down, actually.
Right. Oh, can we do the broccoli one? I just saw it.
Shouldn't we do brief discussion on the ike variable thing that we have Diego over here? Or
Okay, yeah, let's do it.
well, but we don't have Mats as well, so.
Well, Diego said he tries his best to represent that, right?
I actually disagree with Mats on this one, so.
I mean, we can take a look at it and we can discuss it more if we have to. I mean,
Is Mats coming?
I don't think he is. I don't even think he's in. I think he's maybe on vacation.
Seen him
Where's the
green.
one actually? Oh, here we go. So generally speaking, so my concern with this API is pretty simple. Like I would say, to me, it seems a bit odd that we add APIs here that we don't add here, specifically the one that returns these guys. That seems odd. The second thing is, The pattern itself, I think, warrants some discussion whether we want to do this at all. But let's say if we would remove those ones from the discussion for now, the remainder looks sensible to me, and I have no problems with that.
Well, so
We'll decide later if we want to add this pattern as well or not.
Additional kind of comment that I would have is, I don't think we have any try APIs on Link. And I think the reason is that people like to chain these calls. So most of these APIs, I could imagine them, instead of this being try, we use nullable, because nullable can be chained. You can basically do, value or default, and you end up with a default value. You can keep chaining them.
Isn't that what first?
Yeah, except for default, you can't tell, right?
Okay, so if it returns 0 instead of.
This pattern in general doesn't work with Link, and that's the reason that first or default and singular default exist. The only advantage value of this API is to differentiate the case in which you got a null value from a case in which you actually didn't find a value at all.
So why would we not return nullable instead of doing try APIs?
So nullable is because nullable has that problem that you cannot tell the difference between something being null and something not being there at all.
So
Capable of DB null.
Well, if you have an IEnumerable of object as opposed to IEnumerable event, like null is a valid value. That's your argument.
Yeah. So that's what the motivation for bringing this API to existence is, but I personally don't believe that that's enough.
Well, the problem is, in general, like even this API is a generic, right? You don't know whether it's a value type or a reference type, so you can't do nullable of T unless T is a value type.
Yeah.
So like
nullable wouldn't work.
Option of T.
So if you scroll down, there is optional of T.
That may not be a bad thing.
Yeah, somebody actually came up
You
with
could argue that this is kind of what it is, right? Like,
Can you unfreeze the video, by the way?
yeah.
Okay, so I see that would be it. Yeah, I kind of like, I don't know whether the tuple one works, but I kind of don't like try APIs without parameters on Link. I just think it doesn't fit. Like if Anders was in the room, he would probably say, "What are you doing?"
So Warren had a comment about that. He explained that if you, let's say that you put this call nested inside a link query, then you are forced to share that out parameter in all the calls that you make when you are iterating over the results.
Yes.
And then the query becomes side effecting, and then it's basically the whole paradigm of Link blows up. Like you cannot execute it in parallel anymore. Well, basically, no other thing in Link has side effects.
Exactly.
That's a good point, actually. I think. So that would almost argue that the ones that takes out, like so that the out ones themselves are then basically almost non-starters, I would argue.
I think the problem, I'm not trying to argue in favor of adding this API, but the problem with that argument is that if you make the tuple version the only one that we add, then it kills the usability that they were trying to add. It's basically the whole point of this API is that it's sure to do this thing of trying to get the first value with the option to know whether there wasn't the first value there,
right,
in just one step and efficiently. If you make it then check for the tuple, then kind of the usability of the API also goes away. I don't like the try pattern either, and now it's a little nicer because you can inline the...
Do we have a code sample that explains the point that you just made? Like,
why do you think it's less usable? Because I think the one that returns the tuple is probably the most usable in the sense that you have a single variable with basically it's the same as the option of T, right?
Yeah.
You basically return a single value where you can ask whether the value exists, and so you can basically do it in a link fashion pretty easily because the whole thing becomes an expression with no side effects, right?
It requires you to capture that return value as a local. You can't do it in a single if statement.
Well, you can because you can do pattern matching. So
yeah, but the pattern matching requires you to have to capture it as a local, does it not?
Well, I'm not entirely sure. Like, what would the single if look like?
If my queryable dot try get first blah 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 out value.
Say if try single as x and x succeeded, and then that's it, right? Like it's the same thing.
Yeah.
You have to assign. So it's just a little bit more code, honestly. That in the end it's not much nicer than the try with the out. But I agree. I mean, it's not terrible. But in the first place, I'm not sure that many people really value not being there. And there are other ways. I mean, if you really want to do this, you can take the enumerable or the queryable, get the numerator, and iterate once. I mean, get the move next method, see if there is something there, and then if there is another move next, for instance, then the result of this is.
So I agree with like first it's pretty straightforward. For last it kind of sucks a bit more, but.
So if we added option of t, it would solve the problem, correct? It would be nice usability-wise, and it would work.
I mean, option of t is the same problem as the tuple, right? Like I mean, like this.
It doesn't. It works in an maybe.
The option of t is different from the tuple. It's just a thing that has two properties, right? Like.
Well, no. So an option
It would be tuple. It would be like names tuple, right? That's the difference.
It would look just a bit nicer. That was well known.
It would be what?
The code would look more nicer if there was a well-known type that represents.
No, I agree with that. I think honestly, to me, like, so the only argument, in my opinion, for having option of t rather than this tuple thing is that, to me, tuples in general, I'm not a fan because they make the APIs look fairly busy because it's very hard to parse, in my opinion.
Also, they cannot have APIs on them. Versus option of t could have basically same APIs as nullable of t. It would have value of default.
Extension methods, but like the other thing is you cannot enforce consistent naming because it's purely, convention that you claim its success and way. You could name it like, foo and bar or not name it at all. Right? It's also valid. In which case, it's hard to document a concept that is literally like a convention, right? It's very easy to document an API and say, use option of t for cases x and y. The only thing is, every single time we talked about option of t, we ended up not doing it because we couldn't ever agree on the how we plug it through the system with nullable and other things and like what we want the behavior to be.
I was wondering actually if there is any synergy between option of t or optional of t and the non-nullable reference types idea. Is that going to work well with nullable, or do we need something new that?
Well, think of non-nullable reference types. They're like the way they work is they almost don't exist as physical types because basically you just say foo and that means non-nullable effectively, and then we only add syntactic sugar to express nullability of reference types, but those will mostly be hints at the
level.
At the
so we don't use a type for that.
I'm not sure we close whether they're mod ops or whether they are error. I don't think they are mod ops.
But I think that with current proposal or even the preview, it has nothing to do with runtime. Runtime and libraries are not changed. Like it's strictly compiler warnings and insurance.
Yeah. I mean so syntactically you cannot tell the difference between a nullable reference type and a nullable value type, but type-wise they're different. Like one of them is a constructor generic, the other one is just some metadata.
Okay, so given that, I would say is one reason not to add option of t because you now have like multiple concepts that mean almost the same, but not exactly, and it becomes confusing.
Except we repeatedly have the problem that nullable of t is constrained to struct, therefore you cannot, basically it's a type that cannot be used in generic code.
Yeah.
And like, if you're dealing with t's and the t's are not constrained to struct, you're screwed. We don't basically have a type for it.
So I mean, like if you compare nullable and optional, like they're also different concepts in the sense that, like for example, nullable has arithmetic defined over it, versus the option of T wouldn't have that. It's literally just pure data holder. You cannot do any math with it. Like if you want to do math, you have to get the value.
I agree, they're not the same concept.
And
They're similar though.
Like I think
But I don't say. I mean, if you see a need for it,
It's basically, we hit this from time to time. Somebody comes with like generic API, and they're like, oh, geez, nullable would be nice, but we cannot use it here. And I wonder whether this is the, review. This is the case where we pull the trigger and we just do it.
so. Then the question. So let's say we have option of T. Where else will we use it in the VCL?
All the other places that in the past we were like, if we had the option of T, we could use it.
But there's like, I want to say, I have to say, there like it comes up, but it's like, I think since we had Rosen, there were like 4 places in the BCL. Like it's not like, oh my god, this type is useful. Like it.
And every time.
Want it as well, like external, not only BC.
No, I get that. What I'm saying is that we have to like, I think like it's very weird to me to have a type that we don't use, because that ends up usually in the world where nothing interacts with the type, right? And it's like I think you have to have semantics, for example. Do we want to have an implicit cast from inaudible of T to an optional of T, for example? Or do we want to have a try parse pattern that returns an optional of T, right?
But the thing is that every time we have this case, there's a discussion, oh, geez, would we use it in more places than this one? And then we punt, and then 6 months later, we're in the same spot.
So you're saying if we were to add type, we would use it?
I would just add it and be done with it. If we think that, okay, so the only thing I would do is I would add it if this API would actually use it. Yeah, I would not add it like
Just for itself.
just for the sake of it, because we.
But then we're talking about adding compiler support and other things too.
I don't know.
Why?
initially you don't need compiler.
Option of T doesn't need as
You
much.
could literally do the thing without any compiler support, right?
I mean,
You could come later.
Yeah. You could use nullable of T without compiler support too. It's just not as pleasant.
Well,
I'm not sure what your statement. Like usually adding language semantics later may be harder, depending on what you want the language semantics to be.
No, I meant the syntactic sugar for that.
Will it be the same syntactic sugar that we have from Nullable?
Yeah, that's the question, right? I mean, like you have to be careful that you don't. Like for example, one common problem that language guys have is, depending on what you want the semantics to be. For example, you may or may not want the rules to participate over resolution. If you want to do that, then it's certain design, and then there's other things where it's like other design. And like I think fundamentally, I think we should talk to language guys to say, if we were to add optional of T, what would that mean? Like how would it interact with reference types? Does it at all? How would it interact with nullable types? Does it at all? Will we have syntactic sugar? If so, what does it look like? Is there any interop story between these 3 things? I mean, if so, what do we want to do? I mean, generally speaking, they were the ones pushing for it in the Rosen time frame because they had to model, for their withers essentially the absence of a value, as opposed to null being.
Actually, Bart mentioned that example in this thread or on NPR, saying that Roslyn could use this. Everywhere you have a try method, you could probably have an overload that uses optional.
But it seems to me like, is it fair to say then, I think we wouldn't do the try methods without. If we were to do them, we would do them in such a way that there are side effect-free atomic values we return. And we think tuples would be very odd. Is that a fair summary?
I like it. The other challenge is that we will probably need to come up with a new naming convention for the methods that return option or optional, because try is already.
Yeah, I had this discussion with Christopher a few times. I disagree with Christopher, I think. Like to me, try, like he was basically saying, you can correct me if you think I'm wrong, but like I think the idea of try was, we basically don't throw an exception. Like instead of throwing an exception, we give you a return rate that indicates whether we succeeded or not. We have used try in other places where it's not really an exception. Like it's more like trying to communicate in the API. We have to deal with this thing not returning true. And so, like you may not be able to get a value, like try get underlying array or try get underlying handle or some other API doesn't matter.
But you don't have an out. So you would like to reuse the try name?
Because I mean, like you could say single. Like in this case, you could almost argue. Versus try single would just not succeed, right? It would just return false. In which case, it's in line with what our existing try parse pattern, except our existing try parse pattern basically dictates Boolean return and out argument, and would have basically changed the pattern to say or you return an optional.
We could call it single optional.
I think the only reason I don't like it is it seems what I want there is a verb, not an adjective.
Which one is a verb?
Like try is a verb, right? Optional is an adjective. It seems like single optional seems. It doesn't tell me what it does, right? It tells me it's.
Well, single doesn't tell you what it does.
Well, single is a noun, right? Like,
Exactly. Well, it's a.
well, I guess. Well, I mean, depending on who you read it, but yeah.
Adjective.
Single as option.
I mean, we could follow the order or default thing and say last or none or something. And then optional, you would just say
Single or false.
last or else.
To the PHP or die thing.
But I think this is where this proposal is hinging on, right? I think like if we were to do this, we have to come up with a pattern for optional of t. Like what's the
Yeah. So we said we don't like the ones that use out parameters, and we don't like the other ones because they hijack the try pattern for something new.
Even things like dictionary.try get value automatically return optional of t with the correct compiler support.
I'm skeptical that it will ever happen.
I think it doesn't remove the problem that link queries that use this become side effecting if you do it that way.
well, not necessarily, right? If you do it like the way he described it, is you would have a hidden local, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that you have side effects in link is also to do with the fact that link is an expression, and declaring a variable requires a statement. So you basically force it to be outside that scope. But
Then like super low.
yeah, it would be like similar localized as letters, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
You're capturing a value, but the value is immutable once captured.
Yeah.
So. But I mean, we're deep down the rabbit hole at this point.
So what do we do with the IN variable? Are we gonna leave that? The try
honestly,
single?
I still don't know that this API is worth the
trouble.
The trouble. Like, for instance, you have a try get value on dictionary. You know that. I mean, if we had an API that was simpler than that, it would probably just return null when the value is not there. I don't know. Like, for many things, null is okay.
Except we
okay.
don't have null for some types.
Yeah, I know, but
like ints.
But that's why first order default exists and single order default exists. Like, it's not nullable always, but sometimes it's the default of the type. I mean, there's already a solution in Link for this. It's only that it doesn't cover all the bases.
I think I kind of spelled the word hijack. I think that's how it's spelled, right?
Yeah.
We're not sure we should hijack the try parse pattern. One and but it might be a sensible way. Right. So what does it mean for the person filing that issue? Like to me, it seems like it's mostly an action item on us whether we believe this API is useful enough to have the conversation on optional. But I also kind of agree with Christoph that it just happens to be the current issue where optional would have been valuable, but we already know that optional would generally be valuable. Like to me, it's not like, well, we have to invent optionality just for this one case, right? It's just yet another timer that would be handy.
So I would say that maybe we should do the discussion that because all the points that you made are good points. Like when we design optional, there are many questions that would need to be answered. I think if we answer them and we do add optional, I think it would be the best way to design this API.
Is there an existing issue for discussing optional?
I don't think there is.
Okay.
There is. I'm pretty sure there is. Without our input, I think.
Yes. Would that be under the Roslyn or Core CLR?
It's going to be Carfax.
Carfax, okay.
What's the other one I had?
Language syntax.
What was the name of the question? The
Question mark operator?
question mark.
Null
dot-
propagating operator.
Yeah, they have that and they have the null coalescing one, depending on which one you mean.
I found it.
Yeah, it's.
You need it?
No, I
Slash
found it.
VBT and
Yeah.
either.
I found it. If you wanted to link to it, it's 18159.
Let's do this. And let's do.
Basically stalled. So did we approve at least or do we want to go ahead on the enumerable, or should we block with that one as well?
Well, it has the same problem, right? It has the same API patterns.
Because it would use the option in there as well.
No, like this one doesn't use optional. This one only uses the try pattern, which we don't like because it has the out arguments, right? And then this one has both of them. Like I would say, in general, it seems very weird to me that enumerable and query will have different API surface.
Mm-hmm.
I would say whatever we decide, we should just have it in both places.
If we had option, would we have try single returning option on both?
Yeah.
That's the answer. So we want to explore that option, the avenue.
I think
Option of the option. I like it.
somebody should write down what you need to do to use it.
Yes. We should sing with the language guys on that. I'll talk to Mats about it.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks, Diego.
By the way, you are now a permanent member on the team, so you get all the invites, all the meetings.
You have to come. You have to show up. Yeah.
You have to
I know
show
that.
up, yeah. Which building are you in? Are you in 18?
I didn't have anything more interesting on Tuesdays. I have the Core War meeting.
And there's this initiation ceremony. We forgot to mention.
Oh, yeah.
There's
There's
money.
this initiation ceremony.
Okay. Do I need to pay everybody for beer or something?
It's not expensive. Don't worry about it.
Have you heard of Herb Farm? It's
Low key restaurant.
very low key.
Video is frozen again, by the way.
Oh, me and my thinking pose. I love
So before we jump to Berkeley, really quick one. Sorry. Second from the bottom.
You said.
Dictionary capacity. We already had it here, and there was discussion about the name.
Oh, it's only the name you have to agree on?
You clicked on the wrong.
Or I forgot, like, you know.
But this one will be also fixed, I think.
Yeah.
Alright, so...
And if you remember last time we discussed, like, you know, hey, we have the capacity, and what was it that we agreed on? Oh shit.
I haven't read the comments.
Oh, that was the trim. Yeah, because I over here I said actually
Yep, I remember now.
it was the resize. The thing is that we will never, I believe, we will never actually try to make it smaller. So that's not about that. It's more about upfront allocation, because you know that I'm going to be inserting 10,000 things. So please don't reallocate over and over again on the way. So the agreement, at least for that scenario, was like to rename it, or to introduce the ensure capacity. We don't need a trim yet.
Well, we don't need the trim yet, but then when we need trim, then we have more complicated, more APIs. Should we just solve, kill two birds with one stone?
Do we ever figure out what trim would do on dictionary?
Yes, when you have too much slack, it will just make the...
But it's about load factors and all other things, and that's getting messy. I don't think that we have answer to that.
But I know it's more complicated. I agree. The point is, it would basically mean we don't ever add ability to shrink.
Then calling it resize, as we originally approved, seems weird.
Okay, but are we even ready to make the decision that we don't ever add ability to shrink dictionary? Because I'm not sure. Or it's basically, I want to avoid, it's hard to do the right thing. Let's do the sloppy thing.
Sure. Like that. But we have business need, for the ensure capacity. It's a thing that's hurting either MS build or something in the project system. And that's why David filed it, right? So solve it in general, and we don't know how. And we thought about it, they thought about it, we don't know how to make the resize be meaningful. Because resize kind of says that, it's going to shrink as well. How to make it not a confusing API. Or the other option is to call it ensure capacity,
yes,
which might be potentially, if we one day find out some beautiful name and beautiful behavior, might be suddenly superfluous API. But the likelihood that we're going to find some sweet spot eventually is pretty low at this moment, because quite a lot of people thought about it and we cannot come up with anything. Not maybe such a bad middle ground.
So I am not convinced that it's so hard to design resize. Did anybody actually look seriously into this, or just people want ensure capacity and they are pushing for it and telling us that it's very difficult to do resize?
Well, we over here are not able to come up with that. And
I mean, how do you address the second comment from Dave, though?
What is it? Even recreating.
Basically, what he means here, I think, is if you use the dictionary constructor that takes a dictionary, that's a way to shrink it, but if you need to re-add things to that, you're kind of in the same boat.
Exactly. So that means it sounds to me like he wants to shrink too in MS build, right? Because you did this huge thing and then you want to be able to
explicitly says they don't need shrinking down there, like when we had the discussion after the API review.
Okay, that's what he says here. Yeah. You're right. And I still don't understand what his first comment was.
But I don't know why you would shrink and then re-add.
Well, I mean...
No, he doesn't want to shrink.
Isn't that what...
So, go down, then he explains what he meant. He might have
He says, I can see where we want to shrink.
But for the most part, we only want to increase.
Yeah, he basically says it's higher priority to increase.
Yeah.
Sure. I just didn't quite understand the original comment. Okay.
So that's what I remembered last time. He says the key purpose, 2 weeks ago, the key purpose was of the API, at least when I file it, was to increase the size, not trim it.
Yeah, I completely agree, but this is basically the difference between our team and customers. Customers want what they want at this given month, and then we keep adding APIs that are not general purpose, and then we end up having modes because, we added this API 2 years ago to increase, and now we have this other to trim. How do they relate? And blah, blah, blah.
So the only question is like, do we think that eventually we can, expose some kind of resize API, or we're fine if we over time we expose trim?
So I know that resize is a bit more complex, but I would say the semantics should be the following. You pass resize, and you can pass a smaller value than the current size of the internal structure, but the semantics of the value that you pass in are the following. I will be able to add as many items to the dictionary without any resize.
Say that again?
Basically, you pass an int to resize. It means I will be able to have that many items in a dictionary without causing any resize.
Sure, we could have that as a loose guarantee then.
You mean a dictionary doesn't have to trim? That's basically what I'm saying. Yeah, because sometimes it may be difficult to compute.
Because remember, the implementation is still free to say, like, I'm going to start rebucketing everything anyway.
Basically, the resize semantics would be, I will try to optimize my internals, but I will ensure that I will not resize if you add up to that many elements.
I'll try to make it as optimized as possible.
And some dictionaries may basically, in resize, do nothing because it complies with the contract.
What's the ensure capacity?
It does apparently 90% heuristic, so it goes to 90. It trims it down to 90% load factor. That was the key thing that if you trim the dictionary, like, are you gonna trim it so that the load factor is bad, or?
Well.
So those are,
Yeah, so let me answer the question. Today, dictionary has already the concept of load factor, correct?
Which we don't expose. It's internal
yes,
implementation.
and at some point it resizes when it crosses the threshold. It would be the same here.
Yeah.
You pass an int, and basically the guarantee is I will not resize till you add more items than the int.
Yeah.
And you have to incorporate the load factor in your computation. Otherwise, you can optimize your internal data structure to be as small as you can. So let's say I have a dictionary that has a fixed load factor, and the load factor is 2x. And somebody passes me 100 to resize. I allocate an array of 200 buckets. And if I maybe before had an array of 1,000 buckets, now I have 5 times less memory.
So you're saying, but who does this computation?
The dictionary.
So the load factor is internal to the dictionary then?
Of course, so it knows how much slack it needs.
You said we have the concept of the load factor, but that's I wasn't sure whether you meant for the consumer or
and also, I can imagine some dictionaries it's not clear, they don't know. The only thing that they need to do is to ensure that they don't resize. So they don't have to trim back a lot or at all.
I mean, they don't have the only thing a dictionary has to do is make sure that it doesn't have to resize if the only number of elements you push in is what you pass to the.
Exactly.
Yes.
But basically, what I'm saying is some may have problems trimming, but the contract for trimming is a bit more looser than for ensuring that it has enough capacity.
Yeah. So to use your exact example, you pass in 200 as a capacity, and it allocates 239 buckets under the covers.
Exactly.
Sure.
What's the difference between growing and shrinking in the dictionary? Because effectively you have to rehash anyway, right?
Correct.
You have to redistribute the existing items you have.
Yes.
So how is it making your life harder if you have to shrink?
What do you mean by why does it make it harder?
Yeah.
I think that some people commented that some hash-based data structures, they may have problems determining the absolute lower bound to not resize. They have a margin of error. Not only they not only have a load factor, they also have a margin of error.
Well, but let's say you have currently 100 items, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have capacity for, let's say, 10,000, right? And let's say I want the capacity to be 2,000. Well, incorporating the load factor, you know how much you can trim your data structure, right?
Correct.
I mean,
I'm with you.
To me, like growing and shrinking from a hash table standpoint seems like it's almost exactly. And then you have to rehash the items and stash them in there. That's effectively what you have to do. The only thing you have to make sure is that the argument the guy passes in is at least count. Like if it can be smaller than count.
Yeah. So then the next question is, what if you pass something smaller than the count? Do we just ignore it and use count, or we throw?
It's a contract violation.
That's what we approved last time.
Yeah.
You cannot do that.
Sure.
Let's read actually the two replies from Dan and.
So that's why to me this is the API pattern that they proposed. Somewhere
Let's go up,
here.
Dan pushed back on the.
That seems weird.
Yeah.
Because that now we're to me this could have been the same API. We just decided that we don't want to do the same API, and that seems just odd. I think it's much easier to just have one API that takes a capacity. And if you pass in a value smaller than count, we throw. And anything larger than count is fine. And then.
And then we pretend that you just ran a constructor and then we reset. Yeah, exactly.
If you go up a little bit, still up. Yeah, this is it. This is right after our API approved, right? So the Dan's and Ben's comments that basically sparked you flipping it back to design discussion. Are they addressed? The rest is about ensure capacity.
Well, these two comments I think we addressed last time. It's like, so this is just naming. So it's ignore the name of the method, right? We have some method that allows you to specify the capacity that the dictionary can hold, right? Whatever we name this guy. That can be larger or smaller than the current capacity, but it has to be at least count.
And its semantics is that it's gonna go to nearest prime. So even if it can already hold the capacity, it's gonna try to shrink.
Well, to me, how you determine the size of the array, to me is like
implementation
specific.
Load factor plus nearest prime. I don't care. Right? There's some algorithm that you have to run today when I do a new dictionary and pass in 1,000 for capacity, right? So somehow you took that value and you turn it into the size of the array. Like our contract is not that whatever you pass in is the actual size of the array. All we are saying is that the contract is if I add elements up to that number, you don't have to resize.
So that's the contract. Okay. Now the question is how we name the function so that it expresses the intent.
And that to me can go up as well as down. Like there's no reason why this is only going one way. And so that's why I said to me that the naming is almost at this point irrelevant.
Okay.
Well, it is relevant.
I'm just saying their pushback from the last time was just I don't like the name, which is okay, fine, let's talk about the name. It doesn't tell me that we should have a grow only API. It seems weird just because we can agree on the name we make it grow only. That seems pick some name that conveys the concept.
But I thought that the argument was that resize implies that it can shrink. Ensure capacity does not say anything that it will shrink.
Correct.
And then we need a name that says it can either shrink or grow, which resize, in my opinion, is a better name.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah. It's just that they didn't like the terminology size. And I said, okay, then let's pick some other thing.
Like optimize for capacity.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I see.
Or something like that, right? But to me, what I want is an API that effectively allows you to grow and shrink. And that's it. And a true capacity.
Let's call Miguel and call it capacitizer. Yeah.
Capacitize. It has to be a
capacitize.
We can make it one capacitizer.
I like it.
2000.
One capacitizer 2000.
Yes.
I love that.
So this is where I make you all sad. It sounds like hash set of T exposes.
Hash set of T.
Yeah, which is very similar to dictionary.
Okay.
in terms of API surface and behavior.
Okay.
Anyway, it exposes the trim excess method publicly.
Yeah, but that's shrink only,
That is shrink only, yes.
which is not what they're asking for because they want specifically grow.
No, but that is a potential argument for having two different APIs.
Oh,
We
I
have
see what you're
established
saying.
pattern, basically. That's
Yes.
what you're saying.
Yeah. On the other hand, though, I don't think we have growing here, right?
Well,
What-
not exposed. Where's the shrink? I can't see that.
No,
It's
because
called-
I'm on the wrong
Yeah.
tab. I'm an idiot. That's why.
F set of T trim excess is the name.
Yeah. There you go. There it is. Trim excess.
What's the name of the API on the array list? Is it, I mean, on array? No, sorry, on list. Is it also trim excess or just trim?
Trim excess.
Yeah, that's the thing I said last time. I mean, to me,
Yeah.
if we make it trim only, then trim excess it is. I don't think we have any API that is ensure capacity today. I think they are only private.
List of T has an actual capacity
Well,
set.
Streamweather has it. Everyone.
Yes.
That's the only one that has it.
Yeah.
And does it have trim?
List has both trim
No,
and
string
capacity.
builder.
Streamweather has trim excess, yes. That's why that's the wrong one.
Well, it has capacity and it doesn't.
Setting capacity should allow to grow.
Okay.
Yeah, it only has
We don't
one
have
way.
trim. Yeah.
And, well, I think you can set the length, I believe.
Yeah. Capacity should be settable, I believe.
Yeah.
Oh,
And the
as is-
capacity as well.
So it has ways. It's just not. So we have both patterns for method-wise. Like we have access to fields, or we have ensure and trim. So. It's not
Well,
set.
first of all, we don't want to store the fucking value, right? That's
Yep.
the biggest problem. Secondly, I think for a thing that wraps a buffer, making the capacity settable, I'd argue is still something I find weird because you at least have to allocate new and copies, so it's not what I would consider a cheap operation. But for something like rehashing and like that seems like a really bad thing.
Yeah. But presumably any API that we add to dictionary, we would also add to hash set just for symmetry. Like,
Well,
don't
I
see why
think
we
for
wouldn't.
maybe. I mean, to me, if you look at usage, hash set is not used as nearly as often. But like, yeah, we could make this the same or not. But
Okay, so let's now walk through the alternatives. So we add a trim excess method to dictionary.
so to be clear, we don't have a
Yeah, and which is nice, basically, like, hey, whatever you have. Well, yeah.
Do we want to provide capacity or we want to?
I mean, you could say trim excess could take a capacity that is
In the extra,
that is defaulted to count, right? Like, I mean, I don't know how I would indicate this in the API. I would make it an overload, I suppose. But,
Oh, 0.
well, that would be bad.
Work.
Almost always throws.
-1.
Capacity cannot be lower than count, right? Like what does Streamweather do when you set capacity lower than count? Does it throw? Or does it just delete data?
On which? Oh, no, we can check here on the.
List of T.
Throws. String builder throws when you set the capacity to too low a value.
I wonder what list of T does. Is the capacity? Does it? Oh, you have dots. Oh.
Same thing.
Throws? Yeah. So let's say we had trim excess either with the parameter or without. What would we call the method to set capacity?
Well, we would do the ensure capacity similar to Streamweather.
Why is it called ensure and not set? Like, how is...
It's telling the underlying data structure, do your magic, make sure that you can hold this capacity.
How is it different from set?
No. No, it is different because let's say it does nothing. Because when you do set, you would shrink.
Or ensure capacity 1, it does nothing.
No. What do you mean it does nothing? It throws.
No, because let's say you have a Streamweather of count 0. You have not written anything to the Streamweather.
Okay.
Capacity is 100. Now we say ensure capacity, you pass an 80.
Mm-hmm.
We do nothing because we already have 100. But ensure capacity just means grow if you have to.
I see. Yeah, okay. Alright, sounds good to me.
String builder has ensure capacity.
It's not a great name, but on the other hand, like, it's an established name. I mean, it's one API we have in the framework, as much as this is an established API, but
kind of.
Okay.
it's a core type, so I can kind of claim Pioneer for that. So that would basically leave us with what I just said is stupid, which is the proposal that David had here, which was this one here.
Change the size. Yeah.
I'm still trying.
Yeah, and I do think that if we are starting from scratch, we would design it differently, but given that we already have trim access,
Yeah.
we should just keep that.
I'm also trying to wrap my mind around why string builder has both a capacity getter and setter and an ensure capacity method.
Do we, in trim to size, do we want an option of providing the capacity? Or we want to trim to count?
Yeah, that's a good point. Do we want to start a new pattern? A slightly improved pattern.
Well, what would it look like? Like this, I suppose?
Well, we could just add optional parameter
Yeah.
Well, what would you set it to?
to a sentinel value -1, which means the current count.
Oh, fuck me.
Yeah, I know.
You're ugly, but yeah. Maybe incapacity equals -1.
No, that's bad.
I think that's not ugly. I mean, that's, yeah, I wouldn't do that. I would literally do this. I would just have it like this and say, cause the other passing in count.
So, two more questions. One is, they need it soon. Do we add both APIs at the same time, or?
Well, I would say at this point we would just do both of them and call it a day.
It's gonna be simple.
Another thing,
I mean, to keep in mind, like, the reason they want this API is prop optimizations, right? So I think once they're past the fact that we resize things all over again, at some point they may find, oh, we have these long-running things over here, and now we want to do trim access on those. And, like, given the cost we have to wrap these APIs, we'll just do both of them at the same time and be done with it.
And Mariam is actually ready to do that, so that's why we want approval.
By the way, we need to, like, I guess Keen wants this on full framework, right? Like, on core doesn't help him much, does it?
We will see. That's not breaking jail yet. It's a separate discussion. I think on core he might be happy.
Well, I mean, given that he's in VS, I don't think adding it to framework helps him either because they can't target it yet. Even if we were to add it immediately.
So
Well,
core is the first step, right? You know,
Yeah.
so let's add it to core.
Yeah.
Then we can open the discussion.
Well, all I'm saying is that in terms of timing, like, whether we do both of them at the same time or one at the same time, I think has to do with, like, how fast they need to be able to.
Implementation-wise, they will be so similar that not doing them at the same time is, in my opinion, stupid. So let's do them.
I would agree with that.
But
too.
there's no technical reason not to do them together, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Just timing stuff. Okay.
okay, another question I have, ensure capacity, should it return the capacity that it was left with?
String builders does.
Because,
Oh.
especially that we don't store the value, so like, it's impossible to tell what the value is.
Fair enough. So we will not expose the field capacity at all, which is good.
Yeah, because we kind of cannot, yeah.
Nice.
So the way that the string builder ensure capacity method works is if the capacity that you pass in as a parameter is less than the current capacity, it ignores what you passed in and just returns the existing capacity as a return value.
Also, it doesn't throw, yeah.
But tell me what the ensure capacity actually will return. Will it return the size? Load factor that would not resize.
Capacity always has the single meaning. It means
The thing is that I don't think that we can say that in properly over here, can we?
You should be able to.
Okay.
because otherwise you cannot.
Because we don't do dynamic dictionaries to collisions and stuff
You
like
go to the
that.
nearest prime, you do your load factor computation, and then if you have collisions, you have already like a linked list style approach in the bucket or something. So like you should basically, you may allocate more nodes if you have more collisions, but you don't have to grow the array.
We don't have the fencing.
That's okay. List of T, and what's the other one? Hash set, right?
set of t.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, should we add the same APIs to hash set of t while we add it?
So hash set has already trim access. It doesn't have the one with capacity, it doesn't have ensure capacity. For that. Which is basically nobody uses sets.
So next time somebody asks for it, we may waste half an hour or an hour reviewing API.
No, we're gonna look at this one
Oh,
and say
yeah.
like, yep, this is similar. Yep, copy paste.
Oh, come on, we just we had the same discussion when we were adding trim access to list of t, and somebody said, no, let's not add it to dictionary. When somebody asks for it at the dictionary, we're gonna add it. Now somebody proposed that we add it to dictionary, and we just spent.
So the
5
only
hours
reason why
or
I
5
wouldn't necessarily do it is that Hashset has such a fundamentally different implementation from dictionary. It's like for Merriam, there's not much of like a benefit of doing it both at the same time.
Really? I thought it's implemented as a dictionary.
No,
No,
it's
it's different under the
it's
covers.
some sort of weird tree, and like when you do these other operations like
Red black
No.
tree? I think
no, it's some sort of
it's not hash set.
The APIs are
Sorry,
like
you're right, it's not a
the
tree,
public
but
surface is similar, but
Yeah.
it's there's magic under the covers.
I'm pretty sure that it was actually implemented as a dictionary initially. Maybe
that was the PM prototype that you wrote, but then somebody optimized the
Okay,
product.
fine. Maybe that's how it was.
We think having separate APIs makes is more consistent. Is more consistent. This is the other way around. Well, they cares mostly about goal, not supporting shrinking seems unnecessary, especially just be honest here. Unnecessary stuff. Alright.
Can we at least add like a n for bonus points at the APIs to hash?
Can you actually add there the comment on the trim access? What it returns? That's something that we should.
Yes.
Basically, it's a reverse function of how to compute the thing from the prime number. You get to the you have the prime number, and reverse you have to take out the load factor and then round it to the lowest integer.
What was the other set that we have? The ordered set, sorted set, right?
And then we'll get concurrent dictionary and hash table and everything else, right?
Well, if you use hash table, I don't care. Your performance is already in the gutter, so
Yes.
like, ensure capacity returns the adjusted capacity, which might be larger than what was passed.
I'm gonna edit that because we need information that such that it reallocate.
All right.
For Broccoli, is it for 4 minutes?
So you said
Or-
quickly, but that was 25 minutes ago. I
Yes.
just wanted to like point
I'll
this
stop
out.
saying that word.
Oh, it's all.
Broccoli would be really useful if we can do that. Do you know if it's 15,
Well,
20 minutes? Can we
So
spend
one
time
thing
on that?
I am not sure. I think Ian is still here this week and he wanted to work on it.
Yeah.
You mean Ian? Or-
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we should review it because I think he's basically blocked on
Yes.
this. Okay. So
I would learn my lesson.
To me, broadly stream, like whatever deflate stream looks like, rename deflate stream to broadly stream. That's the API surface, right?
So let's look it up.
Is that fair? Or
Sure.
I think that should be the starting point. I think there may be some
You mentioned
differences,
that there are like a couple of APIs or something that are
like options.
was there the operation status or something?
Those are different. Those are the flat APIs, but what Ivo said is kind of true for the stream APIs.
Like, I mean, half the APIs, I don't know why they're here. I think you probably just did exactly what I just said. Like, these things is probably just what we ended up.
The only thing that may be different is the constructors. The flight stream, we can look at the constructors.
This guy.
Or gzip stream.
Let's say, let's do both of them just for good measure. I think they all take the same arguments.
No, you see, he has more.
Oh, he has the same. He has the same.
He has 6, and this has.
Oh, sorry, it's like leave open and buffer size, yeah.
So I assume that gzip stream has leave open, doesn't have buffer size.
Yeah, I think most of this we don't have them because we started exposing buffer sizes relatively late.
Can I request a feature for API catalog? It should show the parameter names.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be good. I was
It
thinking
does.
about it too.
If you click on it.
So what's the boolean? What's the boolean parameter?
Well, clearly leave open.
Is that ohms string?
Oh, leave open. Okay, so basically he added buffer size. I guess that's fine, correct?
We've done this in other places. I remember the all the winner T stream where we had ended up doing the same thing because the buffer sizes are a perf thing you may be able to tweak.
And buffer size cannot be a property, correct? Because
no, but then you have this whole like gymnastics on like when can you set this and when you disallow setting it. And I think you want this to be an invariant for the time, not something that can change underneath you.
so if you set the compression mode, you cannot set compression level.
Yeah, because compression level implies you're compressing, right? Like there's no compression level for decompressing. Like you decompress whatever the level was that it was written at, right? Compression level just indicates how hard do you try to compress.
And compression mode is compress decompress.
Yeah.
So which that's a very weird API.
I wasn't involved when compression APIs were designed, so that
Because basically, if you call the constructor with compression level, you compressing.
always compress.
So if the other constructor you call when you're decompressing, but it has a mode that is compressing.
So just have a negative value because you're decompressing.
Well, what is weird is that when you specify compression mode, compression mode, compression, you cannot specify the compression level.
Exactly.
Like, yeah, I agree with you.
There are two exclusive set of constructors. Okay, it's hand waving because basically, if I don't care about the compression level, I just can call compression mode that compress. It picks one for me, but still, it's very weird. Anyway.
What it is. Somebody way smarter was involved when this API was designed. It chose not to speak up.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I was in the review.
Did we decide on what the behavior of flush would be? I know we had an email thread about this.
What behavior choices do you have for flush?
Does broadly distinguish between an intermediate flush and a final flush?
I'm pretty sure it does.
Oh, speaking of which, I actually have to run. Who's at lunch?
Are you so hungry?
I'm actually quite hungry, and I need proper food. Yesterday, somebody left before I could go with proper food.
So what are we going to do about this API?
Well, next time we look at this whole thing. Next time when we look about this.
It's January. It is blocked. You'd like to get unblocked.
Well, whatever we do here is probably taking longer than 10 minutes, right? For the whole thing. So how about we set up another thing? We could do later today.
So what about the following? We just approved the stream. He can start working, and then we review the other API on Thursday. Or Friday, whatever is the second meeting.
Or we just meet later today and finish the whole thing. And then it's all good.
Let's do that.
We could do this.
Today's probably better.
Yeah, let's do today later after lunch.
Yeah.
1 o'clock. Alright guys, things online, people.
Wait, 1 o'clock?